I'm a scientist, and my dare to everyone today is to reach too high. Now, I didn't say reach as high as you can. I didn't say reach high enough. I said reach too high. That implies going beyond your abilities, defining your success not by meeting your potential, but by exceeding it. Easy for me to say, Mr. Big Shot Scientist, right? But that comes with stress, because if you define your success by doing something that you're not able to do, you can fail. So how can we overcome the stress that will keep us from reaching too high? That's where my research comes in. We study stress in my lab, the negative effects that it has on the brain, and how we can overcome those negative effects. And one of the tests that we use to measure coping behavior in rats is called the defensive burying test. We put rats into a box that has a lot of bedding material on the bottom, and at one end, there's a glass rod that's wrapped in wire. You know what's coming, right? Rats are curious, and so when they see something new, they touch it. And when they touch that rod, they get a little shock. Not enough to hurt them, but enough to change their mind about that object, because it's no longer a curiosity. Now it's a threat. And rats undertake two types of behaviors to deal with that threat. One group of rats retreats. They go to the other end of the box, they face away from the probe, and they sit perfectly motionless for the rest of the test. We call those passive copers, and they're like little kids who cover their eyes when they're scared, because if I can't see you, you're not there. Then there are the other rats, and they do something really different. After they get that shock, they start to dig down into the bedding, just a little bit at first, and then really vigorously. And after a while, they are digging and plowing and burrowing and throwing and spraying bedding at the probe until they completely bury it. We call those active copers. They work really hard. Now, both groups accomplish basically the same thing. They remove the threat from their perception. But if we measure the stress hormones in those two groups of rats, the passive copers, the guys that stayed still, their stress hormones go sky high. But in the active group, even though they were working really hard, their stress hormones don't budge. So active coping is better at reducing stress than passive coping. And that's true for people too. Even people with terminal illness, if they take an active role in their own treatment and they participate in their treatment, they live longer, experience fewer symptoms, have a better quality of life, even if their actions don't do anything to actually improve their illness. So if we set goals like, I want to accomplish everything I'm capable of, that sounds ambitious, but isn't it really, in a sense, being passive? Because you're accepting status quo. You're accepting your limitations as they are right now as being good enough. I will accomplish this and nothing more. I think we should accomplish more. I come from a modest background, a working-class immigrant family. My grandparents settled in a neighborhood with familiar people, familiar language, familiar culture. But my grandparents and my parents wanted one thing for their kids, and that was that they achieve a better life than they had in that familiar neighborhood. Now, here in San Antonio, we teach and train the children of immigrant, working-class Hispanic families that have exactly those same aspirations for their kids to achieve a better life. And as those students start to realize the opportunities that are opened up to them by higher education, they also often start to realize that success through education might mean not returning to the comfort and familiarity that you grew up with. It might mean venturing out into the unknown, living in unfamiliar places, unfamiliar people, certainly encountering unfamiliar ideas. That can be really uncomfortable. And in fact, that's a lot like being a scientist. Okay, the job of a scientist is literally to advance the human race by discovering new knowledge. And guess what? New knowledge ain't just laying around waiting to be discovered, okay? In order for us to learn something new, by definition, we have to push ourselves into the unknown. We have to go beyond our comfort zone. That's where we can learn something. So if I'm a good mentor, I don't get my students to accomplish everything they're capable of. I get them to accomplish more than they're capable of. And we do that by setting their goals beyond their reach, beyond their capabilities. And then they have to overcome a lot of self-doubt and a lot of stress to meet those goals. And when they do, we congratulate them by raising the bar higher, further beyond their reach, and we get to start all over again. Now that sounds like an endless cycle of frustration, right? It's not. It's actually exhilarating because you get to see your own progress as your abilities increase. That's how we train scientists. But it's stressful and it's uncomfortable. So we need some reward that keeps us coming back for more. We've all heard about the reward system in the brain, right? It has something to do with dopamine. It works like this. It's an evolutionary process that ensures our survival. Survival as individuals and survival as a species. When we're faced with a need that threatens our survival, whatever we do to resolve that need, find food, find water, reproduce, it's reinforced by the release of dopamine in the brain. Now, in scientific terms, a reinforcer is something that increases the probability that the behavior that immediately preceded it will be repeated. Wah, wah, wah. What that means in real terms is it feels good. It feels good, and I want to do it again. So, as a scientist, I'd like to share with you the reward of discovery, because this is like nothing else I've ever experienced. And I'm going to explain it to you by giving you a little quiz. All right? Are we ready? Who was the first man on the moon? Neil Armstrong. What did Neil say when he jumped off the lander? One small step for man, right? Everybody knows this. Who was second? Buzz Aldrin, very good. Some people know that. What did Buzz say? Right? Nobody knows. Nobody knows what Buzz said. Come on, he was second on the moon. Neil was first. That's actually unfair. It's deeper and more lasting than that, because until Buzz stepped off that lander, Neil Armstrong was the only person in all of human history who had ever walked on the moon. And as soon as Buzz jumped off that lander, Neil's place in history was sealed because nobody could ever take that place. From that point on, Neil Armstrong was the only person who had ever lived, who will ever live, the only person in the entire universe who can claim that even for a short while, he was the only person to have ever walked on the moon. So when my students make a discovery, when an experiment works, they get really excited, come running down to my office, data in hand. They want to share it with me, they want to replicate, they want to publish, they want to talk at meetings, they want to share it with the world. That is so important, that's what we do. But for just that moment, with just two of us sitting in the office, it's nice to stop. Think about what you have in your hand right now that nobody else has ever held, nobody else will ever hold again. For that moment, you are the only person who can ever claim to have held that piece of new knowledge in your hand all to yourself. All to yourself. You are absolutely unique. That is a rush. And we get that feeling every time we make a new discovery. We don't have long teeth. We don't have sharp claws. Our evolutionary advantage is our brain. And just like we need food for energy, we need knowledge for our brain. And when we get it, it feels good. That's what we want for our kids. That's the motivation that gets us to overcome our fear of the unknown until we crave it so that we can learn from it and get that feeling. But when we do the opposite, when we retreat into the familiar for comfort, which happens so often now because we're afraid of the unknown, afraid of what's out there, are we really safe? Are we really happy? Or are we just being passive copers, covering our eyes while our stress goes up. Imagine the world if nothing was scary just because it was unfamiliar, if people craved the unfamiliar so they could learn from it. How much stress would that reduce? How much joy would it produce? How many problems that currently seem so impossibly insurmountable might we solve? Learning is a skill. It's an active skill, not passive, and it has to be taught. If we really want a better life for our children, we have to teach them to actively reach too high, to seek the unknown, to learn from it. We have to teach it in our homes, by our examples. We have to teach it in our schools. And by the way, as a country, can we please reach a little higher? Can we please finally commit to fully fund and support our public schools, to reward the best and the brightest for teaching in those schools? As a country, can we choose to respect and admire education instead of demonizing it? Because knowledge makes us all better. It makes us all happier. It's how we reduce stress. It's how we reduce fear. It might even be how we advance the human race if we dare to reach too high. Thank you.